Hey everyone, I'm Jean Chatsky. Thanks so much for joining me today on Her Money. So, most mornings I wake up and I do some form of exercise. Either I go to the gym or I lace up my running shoes and I head out for, I don't know, 4.5 miles. I don't think much about these runs actually, unless it's one of those painful days where I stayed up too late binging the last episode of The Bachelor, because it's been something that I have done for so many years. Running has become a habit that's ingrained in me. I wake up, I run, even when I don't want to run, I get ready for the day, I feel better. But something that one of the recent guests that we had on the show, Ali Abdal, said really stuck with me. He motivates himself to go to the gym because his identity is of someone who values health and values fitness. My morning run may be a habit, something I do without thinking about it too much, but it's my rituals, my shoes, my hokas, special hokas that I can't live without, how I tie them, the pep talk that I give myself when I'm just not feeling it, the 80s music that I typically listen to unless Maddie Majacomo from Peloton has dropped a recent Broadway playlist, which he did this week. Thank you, Maddie. All of those things give me strong attachment to my identity as a runner. And that identity is something that I need to become much more familiar with as I start to train for the New York Marathon next year. You guys hopefully will cheer me on. It is 3 days away from my 60th birthday, so I'm doing it to mark something big. Dr. Mike Norton, who is a professor of business administration at Harvard Business School, he knows all about the power of using rituals to transform our lives financially and otherwise. He was a self-admitted ritual skeptic until the birth of his daughter changed everything and ultimately led him on a 10-year investigation, culminating in his new book, The Ritual Effect: From Habit to Ritual. Harness the surprising power of everyday actions. And Mike's research on topics ranging from the hazards of humble bragging to the rewards of matchmaking and volunteering has been published in top academic journals as well as media outlets like the Wall Street Journal and CNN. He also co-authored a book I highly recommend called Happy Money with Elizabeth Dunn, which was named by the Washington Post as a book every leader should read. Mike, welcome to the show. So good to see you.
Thanks. It's so great to see you also.
So, tell me about being a ritual skeptic. What does that mean? How did you even start to think about rituals?
I was, the work that we had done before, actually with Liz Dunn that you just mentioned, was kind of on how people could spend their money in ways that could make them a little bit happier. But we were thinking not so much if you had $1 billion, what should you do with the money? But literally, if you have $5 today, what should you do with it? And so we really were focused on little small changes that we could make in our everyday lives that might change our happiness or change how we're feeling. And as part of that, we started studying things like gift giving. If you're generous toward other people, that's a good source of happiness. And then I got into gift giving, and gift giving is a crazy, if you think of the rituals surrounding gift giving, whether the holidays or birthdays or baby showers, whatever it might be, that was the initial hook on what are rituals, what are they doing for us, what's happening in our lives. But I was studying them for a while like a nerd academic Harvard professor, kind of at a remove. The other people are doing these, but I'm a serious scholar, so I don't. And as you said, it was when my daughter was born. If anyone's ever had a kid, that's like the biggest shock to your life ever. And one of the things that parents do is right away, they start turning to rituals. You might not call it a ritual in your head, but when you're trying to get a newborn to sleep, if you ask parents, well, what do you do? Incredibly elaborate. Like, it's this book, and then this stuffed animal, and then this song, and then we go into this room, and then we say this, and we have to do this, and we have to do this. And we're creating these incredibly elaborate schemes to get our kids to try to sleep. And we did it too. And then I realized, oh my God, I'm doing these myself in my own life to try to help myself through something that's really stressful. So then I was not only the nerd academic, but I was right in it myself, and that changed the way I studied it.
I'm so fascinated by the fact that the financial got you started on this journey. Years ago, I wrote a book called The 10 Commandments of Financial Happiness, and
Yep.
it was based on a study of 5,000 people. We were trying to figure out what people did that it made them happy with their money. I don't have a PhD, so I went about it the survey route, but it was really interesting to me, the little things that made people happier. Paying their bills as they came in rather than saving them up to pay in a big pile once a month or twice a month made people significantly happier. And saving 5%, at least 5% of whatever it is, made people happier. What is it about the world of money that demands ritualization?
There's also the 5%. There's also the story of the person who drives 500 miles to save 5 cents on gas kind of thing. So sometimes these little things we have can lead us a little bit astray. But I think money, especially the way we use money now, it's very often cashless. So we're kind of swiping and clicking things, and the money goes somewhere, and then, we don't really see what happens to the money. And so for some people, that's kind of upsetting. I don't even know what's going on behind the scenes. I'm just clicking accept or swiping or tapping something. And so people often do want something tangible, like some kind of a little action that really is meaningful for them. It used to be something like balancing the checkbook. That used to be a big deal for people. But we did some research actually a couple of years ago. Grant Donnelly, who's at Ohio State, led this research, where the idea was basically, on your credit card statement when you're paying it off online, it just lists all the things you bought and you just feel terrible. And then, you can do the minimum balance or the whatever you want. And the idea that we had there was, what if you could click specific purchases and pay those off? And when you clicked them, they would explode so that you actually felt like I'm making a little bit of progress. Now, in the end, it just goes to the final balance. So you're paying off the bill. But we added this little tiny action that people could do in order to feel some kind of control over what they were doing. And people really enjoy this little tiny, not quite a ritual like people in robes with candles ritual, but this little monthly ritual of kind of settling the balances and checking things off. And the exploding thing in particular felt really good for people because you feel like you're making some progress.
Sometimes when we venture into ritual territory, it feels like we get a little woo-woo, right? And I'm not a particularly woo-woo kind of a person. You sort of talk about the fact that, well, many of us have kind of lost the rituals that we grew up with, like attending a church service or being associated with another religious community. We've picked up new rituals and we've found new communities like Burning Man and Coachella and Soul Cycle and, for me, Peloton.
Absolutely.
But they do sometimes get dismissed as new agey or millennial. What do you say to those sort of detractors?
I think so. There are people very often who say, I don't do any, I was one of them, I have to say. I don't do any of that stuff. New agey stuff is not for me, kind of thing. And then if you just ask people about their lives, of course they've been practicing rituals all the time. So, I can say, people say, I don't do any rituals like that. And I say, well, have you ever on your birthday had someone bring you a cake lit on fire and then you blow on the cake in order to put the fire out and then you eat the cake? And they say, well, yeah, of course I do that. What a crazy thing to do. Why would you light a cake on fire and get wax all over it before you eat it? But we do these little rituals to celebrate and mark occasions. And then I say, did you ever get married? Have you ever been to a funeral? Even if we're very non-religious, we do scaffold our lives with these big rituals sometimes. And then you're tying your shoes. They also boil down to these little small actions, not the huge cultural rituals, but the ones that we come up with ourselves. And that is really interesting to me, that they're already there. We just kind of need to look for them.
What's the difference between a ritual and a habit?
I think that habits they're kind of the thing itself. They're a little bit dry. So your habit, as you said, is going for a run every morning. And you're going for the run in order to get some exercise because it's good for us. And you have an amazing habit that you do it every day, even if you don't feel like it. So habits are fantastic, no doubt. And I should have better habits too, and I should run every morning. And I think the habits are good, and we want to have good habits, of course. And we do research on helping people have better habits, so it's fully on board. But they're a little bit kind of dry and cold and kind of automatic. We're sort of like an automaton doing the same exact thing at the same time every single day. And for me, rituals are a way to kind of insert emotion and meaning into the things that we're doing. The habit is kind of the what you're doing. You're going for a run. But your little rituals turn the run into something very different. You feel ready to go when you do your shoe tying thing, and you feel safe when you do your shoe tying thing. So we get not just doing the habit, which is good for us, but we can get kind of more emotion out of these same exact actions by adding a little element of ritual to them. And I think a lot about if you had a life of perfect habits, every single habit you wanted to have, every day you always executed it, I think in 30 years you'd look back and say you had a pretty boring life. You'd be very healthy and everything like that, but you'd say, like, I didn't really do anything I enjoyed. And I think rituals can help there as well, that they can push us toward emotion and meaning in ways that just executing mindless habits sometimes don't.
I want to talk to you about where rituals get to be too much, where we get overly involved in our rituals, where they maybe become a time suck. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick break. And I just wanted to take a moment to give everybody listening a very quick sneak peek into what goes on in my investing club, which is called Investing Fix. As part of the program, we present a couple of different stocks or other investments every session for the group to consider and for members to consider for their own portfolio. But sometimes members have an opportunity to present a stock that they have come up with. And Karen Feinerman, who co-hosts the Investing Club with me, works with members. She coaches them in how to fundamentally analyze and then present a stock like you might just do on CNBC, and then the members vote once a month on which one we're going to add to our portfolio. It's really fun. It's actually been kind of profitable for me, at least, and I think for the group as a whole. If that sounds like something you'd like to learn more about, check us out. We're at investingfix with 2x's.com. Come and join our next session. The first month is on me. I am back with Mike Norton, author of The Ritual Effect. So, another ritual I have, I don't think it's a habit, I think it's actually a ritual, and it's also in the morning. I do Wordle, I do Nerdle, and of late, I do the New York Times Connections puzzle. And sometimes I wonder, and I have a friend, actually my colleague Gary, and we average our scores, and whoever loses has to send the other a congratulatory gif that we haven't seen before. But I sometimes wonder, all right, am I like draining 10 minutes, 20 minutes from my day in doing these puzzles that I should not be doing? Whether it's this, whether it's watching Sports Center, whether it's, which not my ritual, but many people's ritual, like how do you know when it's just too much?
I think that we have a limit for sure. So, I mean, it isn't the case that just add rituals to every minute of your life, and then you have a perfect life. I think they have a time and a place for sure. For me, one of the ways I think about it is if they start to interfere with other things. So we're often doing a ritual in the service of doing something else. So even with your shoe tying, you're not tying your shoes in order to tie your shoes. You're tying your shoes in order to go out and go for a run. So we do the ritual in order to help us with something else that we're trying to do. And when rituals go wrong, what happens is we lose the link between why we were doing the ritual and the thing that we were doing it for. So if you think about checking to make sure you lock your door before you leave your house in the morning, totally reasonable thing to do. You do it so that you feel okay about leaving your house and you won't worry about it at work. With obsessive compulsive disorder, which many people have heard of, what can happen is you lose the link between checking the door to make sure it's locked so that you can go out for your day and not worry. And you get in a loop of just checking the lock. And that's when we can really see that they've gone too far. So if you did Wordle for 12 hours a day, we would say, I don't know about that. But what you're doing with Wordle is, yes, it's fun for your brain, but you're also using this little tiny ritual to connect with another person. And so if you think about it as a good use of time, it's not just the Wordle thing, it's what are you getting out of doing the Wordle thing. And you're getting a lot. You get to use your brain, which is kind of fun, and you get this fun connection with another person. So then you can kind of think about, maybe that 10 minutes, that little ritual that I do is actually worth it because I'm getting a lot out of it and I'm not interfering with the rest of my day because I just can't stop doing Wordle.
I'm thinking about Serena Williams, who bounces the ball 5 times before her first serve and 2 times before her second. Is there a line of demarcation that sort of gives us insight into the rituals of high performers?
One of the things we see in the research is that humans kind of bring ritual, we amp it up when the situation requires it. So the more stressed we are, for example, the more likely we are to engage in rituals. And performers and athletes like Serena Williams, they're doing one of the hardest things that humans do. They're doing these incredibly difficult tasks. Or singers, Beyonce has a lot of rituals, for example, as well. And they amp it up, in a sense, because what they're doing is so difficult. And we allow them to do it because we're aware. It'd be very strange if before I taught a class, I did a whole routine in front of the class like these performers do, because they'd say, hey, this isn't that hard. You're not allowed to do that. But even though we're obviously very different from these really famous and talented people, if you ask people, hey, do you do anything before a big meeting or before something you're stressed about? Very often people say, yeah, I do actually, but I do mine in private. Mm-hmm. And so what we do is we sneak into the bathroom and talk to ourselves in the mirror. You said you talk to yourself like you can do this today if you're not feeling the run. Right. We do it in private in order to do it. Now, we don't do like 75 bounces the way a professional athlete might do. But funnily enough, we do similar things. We bring ritual to try to help us when we're stressed as well.
Can we do this prescriptively? So if we do get very nervous before a big meeting or asking our bosses for a salary increase and we don't have a ritual, how can we use this to get us in the groove?
One of the things that researchers have shown is that when you're anxious about something, whatever it is, anxiety is really difficult to damp down. It's like, I'm feeling anxious, and then we say, just calm down, and then that makes us even more anxious because that's not how we're able to do it. So you get in these anxiety kind of spirals in your head, and then all of a sudden the meeting starts. Not a good place to be. But what researchers have shown is that one thing that rituals do is literally give us something else for our mind to do so that we don't go into that anxiety spiral. In other words, I'm still nervous for sure, but I'm able to kind of distract myself from the anxiety by doing this familiar thing that I've been doing for a long time. I know how to do it. It's very orderly. It's not an anxiety-provoking thing. And it does seem like it helps us get out of our own way in order to perform. Not like we're going to be the greatest athlete ever just because we do a ritual. That's not how they work. But they kind of help us get out of our own way and perform to our potential, at least.
For 25 years on the Today Show, I used to 10 minutes, 15 minutes before I was going on, I used to leave the green room and go into the stairwell and just, everybody knows when you do a television segment, like, no matter what they ask you, you got to have 3 points that you're going to hit. So I would go over my 3 points just to make sure that they were top of mind. And then I would leave the stairwell and go back in the green room and hang out until they came to get me. But it's helpful, and it does bring your pulse down a little bit.
And I love the change of scene as well. Very often we leave the place and go to another place to do it, and then we go back to the place. You did the stairwell. When I teach, I hide in my office and go through my teaching plan in a similar way. A lot of us use the bathroom, as I said. It's funny the way we decide when and where to do our little rituals.
Yeah, where you got to be somewhere where they're not going to bug you. Let's talk a little bit more about ritual and work. You cite a study in the book that says on average, people were willing to give up 23% of their earnings for work that offered consistent meaning. Do workplace rituals affect how much meaning we associate with our jobs and how we feel about the people that we work with?
We did research where we asked people, and you can do it for yourself. You just think, are you on any teams at work? And then you can say, does your team do anything? What is your team like? How does your team act together? Do you have any little traditions? Do you have any inside jokes? Do you have things that are specific to your team that are different from other teams? Some teams say, nope, not at all. I'm just like, this is a team. I don't really care about it. And other people say, you know what, we have a couple things that we do. One team that we talked to did a lunch thing where it was a 5-person team. So each person had one day of the week where they got lunch for everybody. And they would rotate it each and every week. Now all they're doing is having lunch. They were going to eat lunch anyway, but this team turned it into a bonding experience because we're all doing a favor for everybody every week together. We've been doing it for a while. This is what we do. We're going to keep doing it going forward. And when we ask teams, that have those kinds of rituals, do you find your work meaningful? Teams that report having those are more likely to say, yeah, I do see some meaning in my work. And we can kind of see that the meaning that's created by these team rituals kind of translates onto seeing the work itself as more meaningful. And I'm sure people have experienced that themselves, where if you really like the people you're working with, even if the job you're doing isn't your favorite job in the world, it changes the meaning of the work because these people now mean something to you.
If you don't feel like you have that, and whether you're a leader or not, and whether you're working in the office or remotely, how do you introduce that to your workplace without feeling like you're going to be perceived as silly?
Yeah, one thing, or hate it, actually. So one
Yeah,
thing that
exactly, yeah.
comes up a lot, people will often say, oh my God, my boss saw a TED Talk or heard some podcast over the weekend, and then they came in and made us do all this ridiculous stuff. So you get a huge eye roll from employees often. And that, I think, is really important because a lot of the rituals that we see people telling us about, they came up with themselves. It wasn't the company or the manager saying, you must do this from now on at this time every day, because those can provoke eye rolls and, reactance, like, I'm not going to do that stupid thing. So I do think it's important to think about having them come from us rather than being forced upon us. And I think when we create them ourselves, we kind of have more ownership over them, and they mean more to us because they literally are us.
Mike, where, if our listeners want to take the ritual quiz, where do you want them to go? And where else can they find out more about you in the book?
Yes, really easy. If you just look up Michael Norton Ritual Quiz, it'll come right up and you can take it. And if you take the quiz, you can also sign up for my email newsletter as well. So it's a good way to keep in touch also.
Awesome. Thanks so much for doing this. Congrats on the publication.
Thank you very much for having me.